What's up? We're back. What's up, Jordan? How you doing, man?
Very much not looking forward to this conversation. Other than that, I'm pumped.
Right on, dude. Well, we're back. We're here getting ready to talk about addiction with two addicts who really need to talk about it. And, you know, I think that it's something that is really cool, man, that I get to do with you, sitting here, getting to talk about something that has been so hard for me because I guess when you are an addict and you've struggled with so many different things like I have, it's hard to try to see yourself that way, where you realize you have these addictive tendencies, and it's something you need to figure out in order to find any sorts of freedom, because otherwise you just become a slave to whatever thing it is that you choose to be addicted to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's interesting hearing you say that, because there's almost like a core identity that's attached to the addict. So my immediate question I have is, have you separated yourself from the state of being addicted to something? Or do you think because of your genetic predisposition or enough patterns of behavior, you'll never be able to separate yourself from being an addict? And do you feel a sense of freedom now that you're so fucking aware of your tendencies to venture down paths of destructive comfort? or do you think it's even something you should seek to become separate from being an addict? Or do you see it as something that is dictated a lot of your energy in your life? Or are you now just at a place of peace, accepting this is your nature? And is it in everyone's nature? Or is it just like I said, the genetic predisposed, unfortunate who deal with it more than others? Like, so where does your stance on it now? Do you feel like you're, like you were saying this morning, you went to do the salt bath, like suffocation chamber of death. And you mentioned there was like this emotional claustrophobic reality of trying to quiet the noise in your head and wanting to be at peace with what chaos is going on. And like we were talking about, it's we put so much effort, especially personality types like you and I, who have put so much effort into almost becoming estranged and like circumcising the part of our soul that is the addict. Like, we want to disassociate. It's like we're excommunicated from that type of state of living. But I think you just felt like you drank from the fire hose, the reality that you're never not going to experience the suffocation of life circumstances to whatever degree. So where are you at now with your perception of, when you look in the mirror, do you see an addict, or do you see a man who has conquered these tendencies?
That is a really good question.
Super fucking long-winded, sorry.
Oh, no. So I think, like, I'll dive into your question and kind of explain a little bit about my journey, and then we'll get into yours, and then we'll kind of talk about what addiction is. Yeah. So for me, like what you're talking about this morning, went into do one of those floating self-deprivation tank things, which is, they're great, but for me, it's difficult in a way because I'm claustrophobic, like I was telling you before we started, and it's something where it's hard for me to get in that thing. And if you haven't seen one, they look like a space pod from Star Wars. You close the lid and there's just this blue light. You're in this water that's got so much salt and that buoyancy that you can just float super easy. And then you turn the light off and it's pitch black. And there's sound, they're pretty sound resistant. You got earplugs in, so you can't hear anything either. So basically you just float and you're there. And the only thing is just you and your mind, right? Which as an addict is like your worst nightmare. Right? Because that's what you're running from, is what you find out. So when I think about, like, this morning, it was something to me where it showed me why I am the way that I am and was the way that I was. Because that type of situation where I'm in there and I hear this sound and it just scared the crap out of me, because it triggered this fear. like I'm sitting there quiet, trying to be all zen and stuff, and then just this sound happens where I'm like, am I stuck in here? Like, what? Like, how is that sound even possible? Did the dude come and lock me in this thing, you know?
Probably.
And it's all of a sudden, it's just this fear just like washes over me. And I'm just like, I got to get out of here. I like, everything goes out the window, right? Because I'm sucked into this mental storm that's just happening with my fear taking place. And it's so uncomfortable. And it's something that I just like, I want to be anywhere else but this place that I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I want to be out of here knowing I'm okay, being in my safe zone, whatever that is. Where, to me, it was just this great way of showing of like, this is what addiction is all about, because it's these types of places that we do anything in our power not to get into. And so, as a kid growing up, and I felt terrified all the time. I mean, I was more of an introvert in school, terrified of public speaking, you know, just like usually kept to myself. And just was really insecure in a way where it caused this thing in me where I was looking for something to escape from that all the time. And it came, you know, from video games a ton. I mean, good Lord, I played so many video games. Oh my word. That it was my escape, you know, and it was something that it brought me a sense of peace and comfort that I really needed to get away from that, you know, because when I go to school or, you know, had certain things come up at home or something where it would trigger that, like, oh, this is that insecurity, this is that uncomfortability that I don't know what to do with. Mm-hmm. So I think it ended up forming into an addiction in the sense of there was something I chose to cope with it in a way that became my master, that I would run to find my escape, to bring me the sense of satisfaction that I was after. And it came through video games, it came through porn. Porn was the big one, especially, I mean, you know, going through school to the time we did, where the internet was like just forming, and it's just like no one knew. My parents didn't know how easily accessible all this stuff was, or, you know, that you can download a peer-to-peer sharing app and see anything you could ever think of. Yeah. And what that does to kids in high school that have this power that they're wielding that they have no idea how powerful it is. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just realizing, man, I am an addict in the sense of like there was this really powerful, potent drug that I used all the time that I didn't know was a drug, that I thought was part of being normal and part of figuring things out. And next thing you know, when you're feeling guilty and shameful about the thing you've chosen because you get that high and then you come crashing down and you're like, okay, this is awful. I don't like being in this state where I feel so bad about what I just did or whatever, right? You know, and it's something where it becomes the worst slave master in the world, because next thing you know, it's this cycle of shame and highs and shame and highs, and then it goes lower and lower and lower, and then you feel like crap and you get depressed, and it's awful, you know, and especially when being in the church and you're praying and you're going, God, like, what is going on here, man? Like, I'm trying here. I'm praying, I'm going to church, I'm doing small groups, I'm doing all these things. Like, what do I need to do to get away from this? You know, and it's something where, yeah, you feel lost. You go and talk to a pastor about some stuff and you get some of the worst advice in the world, where it's like, yeah, dude, just, you know, you got to pray more. You got to really try to get in touch with God. And it's just like, well, that doesn't really make me feel much better, because obviously I'm not doing that if I feel like I'm running to this thing constantly.
It's not addressing the core issue.
No.
So, I mean, you're essentially told, like, good luck, slugger, you know, get back in the game and do more gooder, swing the bat harder. You know, you're hitting little bunts, you know, and that's your issue, and I'm not going to do anything to engage with you in that issue. I'm just going to be in the stands and watch you fail continuously. And that's the interesting thing about spirituality and churches and organized religion is they're selling a false self that is never going to be attained. They say, here's the rules. If you do more gooder, then you should become enlightened in this lifetime, and you should, like in the way Buddha became enlightened and like separate from the human condition that breaks us every day. It's that carrot dangle of here's a simple, you know, 12-step program. If you follow it, you're never going to deal with this again. And the reality is to be human. I think it is to be an addict. And like you said, your sequence of accumulated addictions that you recognize this thing is an addiction because I don't know how to stop it. And that's when, like, if you look up the word addiction, it talks about a pattern behavior, and the separate thing from it being a simple pattern to then being addiction is the addiction becomes a dictator, and the thing that is driving you to seek comfort, it is an irreversible dictator in the sense of anytime there is something suffocating or toxic in your life, you have programmed your mind, because you're human and you are an addict, and you have the capacity to build a pattern so strong that it's almost irreversible. So you seeking comfort in the ways you did it, you put yourself in a category that it's almost a blessing in disguise, because whether it's the video games or the porn, like societally, we have now addressed those things as addictions, quote unquote. So there is tools and there's methods to avoiding those things dictating your life. Whereas, and I want to talk about, eventually get into, but I want to hear more specifically about you, is there is a sad reality that addictions are reserved for the weak of mind, and the weak, the ones who lack discipline as human beings, who didn't have the genetic predisposition to, have a work ethic and avoid things that are toxic. It's just like they're weak, and because of that, they don't know how to stop doing the crack, doing the meth, whatever it is. But the reality is every single day there are men and women going to work who are addicted to achieving trophies, and they're addicted to the budget that is shoved down their throat to climb that corporate ladder, and that is, they're rats in a maze, and they're incentivized by that fucking salt lick at the end of the maze. They're just gonna like snort lines of salt, whatever hamsters do, but that's reality. Is the moms who are going to the gym every day and they're stay at home, and their identity is to take care of their kids and to be seen at the gym. Like, I have 73 kids and I have 2% body fat and I'm tan year round in Oregon and it's raining half the year. So how's that possible? I don't know. I'm just blessed with my melanin. It's like, no, you fucking fake and bake every fucking day and you're going to get cancer. And but those women and those men, not to be gender specific, like they're stay at home dads, obviously, but in our culture, like that Instagram culture of like being addicted to creating a false self, selling a version of yourself that isn't real, like that's just as much as an addiction and just as debilitating, if not more debilitating. And that's what my argument is, and I want to discuss with you, is you're a human being. Therefore, you're fucking exhausted of feeling suffocated and anxious all the time. Okay, if you believe in God, whatever created this thing in our head, we have a computer that says, hey, if you feel discomfort, you're very fortunate to be in a first world country, because there's a fucking million options to not feel that discomfort. Yeah. And you can go, if you were told that you were not pretty, you can spend the rest of your life getting a false sense of security that you can Botox, you can have this surgery, you can have this thing. And guess what? If you get in a car accident or some unfortunate accident happens because of your body being disformed, are you now no longer having any value? So you were addicted to creating this false self of being perceived as pretty, but once that prettiness gets obliterated in a car accident, like, do you lack value now? So where do you navigate that discomfort? Are you going to find meaning if your beauty is gone? So I'm just trying to build a picture on the spectrum of, there's a million different things that we don't categorize as addictions, but if you're a human being and you woke up today, most of the things you're going to do are going to be already predetermined subconsciously, because there's a pattern there. And most of the things you're going to do today by being in a first world country is they're going to be seeking comfort. So you and I have lived on the front lines of fucking suffocating addictive behaviors, to where we had two options. You either face it and remedy it and start to have new patterns, or life's not going to work. But I would argue that most addictions that are not even categorized as addictions are the most dangerous, because from the moment a person's born to the moment they die, they're going to be in the shadows of the subtle addictions, living a life of comfort, never having truly lived their human potential, because all they did was seek comfort. They built a life out of just playing it safe, doing the things necessary to be perceived as a decent human being and a kind person, never having even searched their soul, like, what the fuck is life about? What does it mean? what do I believe in? Or do I just want to be perceived as the person that gets along with everyone? Like, the most cancerous state of mind is to be addicted to being nice, to being kind. That means you are nothing. You are fucking plastic. You have nothing that defines you. So, not to get, I'm clearly very intense about the topic.
I love it though.
But my whole point is to say, is we need to emphasize it's very beautiful how you articulated, I needed comfort because I was anxious as a child. These were the patterns of behavior that facilitated the distancing of discomfort. And I got lost in video games. I got lost in false forms of intimacy and porn.
Yeah.
So for you, now being a grown-ass man, having explored the reasoning behind all of these addictions, taking back to the original question, like, so where are you at? Were you very humbled this morning by the reality that you're still very claustrophobic in your body with feeling out of control?
Sure.
And what triggered you to want to go seek comfort because you were feeling claustrophobic? So essentially, I think addictions stem from claustrophobic moments. That the imagery is very good that you use, like feeling claustrophobic in life, feeling suffocated by life circumstances, and you want to get the fuck out. So unfortunately, we have so many options to get out synthetically. Mm-hmm. But the real problem is until you address the reason why you're wanting to get out of whatever you're in, you're never really going to find peace. Because the more you bury the core issue with the band-aids of video games, sex addiction, working out 73 hours a day, even though there's 24, he found a way to work out 73 of them. All these things that create synthetic forms of control. You felt out of control this morning. Addictions facilitate false sense of security, false senses of control, of comfort. So where are you at now with that battle in your mind?
Well, I think that with this morning, it was something where it shows how easy it is to fall trapped to that same toxic mentality, because this morning it just was something where it was, in a sense, I was caught up in that storm I'm talking about with that feeling of fear and everything else. It was a matter of realizing that it'll pass. It's knowing because of walking the path I've walked that it'll pass. Right? That I don't need to go run and find something to make this go away. I know it's going to go away if I just let, like, it's like a wave. It's like a wave you see coming in the distance, and you're like, I don't want that wave to suck me in there, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of running, you just kind of just let it, right? And it may send you flying on the beach or whatever, but at least you're experiencing it, you're dealing with it, right? You're facing it head on. And so for me, that's just what it was. It was such a, in an environment like that, it's so much more potent because you're trapped there. You're like in this situation where it's like you're floating, you're in this place, and it's like, it feels like it's so much more intense than normal. Because when you're out now, there's so many different things. You can turn on some music, you can watch TV. It's so easy, right? But when you're in a tank in the dark with no sound and it's just you and your mind, yeah, that thing feels like a freaking tidal wave coming at you. Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like when you're in there. But I think to me, it just showed of how important it is when we talk about addiction. It is to realize that life has a lot of things that make you want to run, that make you want to find the comfort. And sometimes you just have to be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to face this. And it's going to be hard. It's not going to be fun, but that's just what you have to do. And it's knowing that, like, most times when I have stuff anymore, I'm able to kind of detach enough where I could see it from a distance, right? It's like, I'm like, man, that sucks. Look at that fear coming on. Oof, that looks like a brutal one, right? But I'm not like in it as much as I was today, And I think being able to do that, it allows me to, I just to let it almost go by like that cloud in the sky, right? And with struggling with addiction and looking back at how it was basically when you're trapped in that, where you can't get away, like where you aren't able to observe it from a distance. You're in it, you're caught in it, and you're like, this is awful. I just want something to get me the hell out of here, right? So you reach for that thing, and it just gives you that sense of, this is great, whatever it is, if it's a drug, whatever it is, it just brings you that like that warm blanket feeling that we were talking about from that video, right? It just like there was this girl in this video Jordan sent me who said she took heroin for the first time and it just felt like a warm blanket, and that's the perfect way of describing it because
made me cry, dude.
Yeah, but
Literally.
that's what it is, right? And it's hard because we look at addiction and we're like, oh, I'd never do something like that. Oh, I'd never do this. But it's like, no, we find these things that are our warm blanket so much that like we don't realize what we're doing. And I think being able to look at it this morning and see it and, you know, just let it be and like just be okay with that is a sense of that's what freedom looks like, where you don't have to run to something to cope. Mm-hmm. You know, where you can find it because of this spiritual journey that you've walked, that you have these roots that will allow the storm to go past. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It absolutely does. You more or less everything you said. It creates a fork in the road, and addiction is, essentially the fork is door A or door B. Which route am I going to go? Door A is the painfully obvious circumstance that you're experiencing in life that is creating chaos and discomfort and suffocation. Door B is our screaming desire to run the fuck away from door A and go find something that will immediately transport us to a place of comfort. Like it's a very simple neurological firing fork in the road that we have every single day. And the more you choose door B over door A, the easier it is to choose door B, because you're programming your mind to say that thing you're struggling with, that reality in your life that's causing discomfort and suffocation. You know what's fucking rad is you could go do A, B, C, D, E, and F, and that'll temporarily not be there. And that's what our minds do. Is we are addiction sponges, and the beauty and the chaos of having free will to seek courage and exploring why you're feeling suffocated. You know, that imagery of like fear as being like a false reality appearing real. You know, it takes an incredible amount of courage to essentially dance with that devil of the unknown, because the whole reason we're feeling suffocated and exhausted and terrified of, whether it's, we just had the holidays, it's like most people's addictions stem from what did or didn't happen in their childhood. So the holidays are, in my opinion, like the most suffocating season of life, because you're going back into the front lines of the chaos with the family members that did or didn't facilitate love, and that reality you have with the understanding that you're worth being loved or not worth being loved. So most of your patterns of behavior are associated with your families and the holidays. So that's why the suicide rate goes exponentially up during the holidays. That's why leading up to going to see a family, you're like, well, I gotta be prettier because my mom suffocated me with not being pretty enough in the beauty pageants, or it's the young man who knows he's not living the life that his dad wanted him to live, and going back to see him for the holidays is just going to trigger this flood of emotions that I'm not enough. So it's addiction is simply door A or door B, and to the extent that you're aware of that relationship and that decision you have to explore comfort over, ultimately, I think door A, in choosing that door, it's exploring the unknown, it's exploring the uncomfortable reality, but it's also like that's the only door that has true life at the other end of it. To be human is to not avoid discomfort, not avoid chaos. It's to understand that chaos is an inevitable part of life. Pain, to whatever degree it comes into your life, is inevitable. But if you want to experience true fucking fulfillment, true fucking joy in life, you need to develop a relationship with the contrast of that, which is darkness, that chaos, the unknown. And to the degree you have the courage and the ability to walk through door A and enter into that unexpected chaos of a family member dying or whatever the fuck is ruining your life. But to enter into it, like you said, to be an observer of it and explore, why is this creating chaos? The more you're able to do that, the more you're able to explore what it means to be human. Because the other path it is literally retarding and numbing your sensory of being human. Like, you become a vegetable. If you seek comfort, what do you become? You become a fucking, like, just a slug. Slug of nothingness that has no resilience. You don't know anything about anything anymore, because all you do is you are a reactor to pain, which therefore I escape to comfort. I escape to false senses of security. So you create a complete synthetic form of existence. So to be human is to accept that you have an innate addiction to seeking comfort, but you have the capacity to choose to explore the fucking terrifying unknown of life circumstances. So
sure, but I think going back to us and kind of being this guinea pig.
Yeah.
I think, especially in our little Western world that we're in right now, the resiliency is going down so fast. We're like
infinitely.
Yeah, where we don't know how to be without running to something to help us cope with any sort of uncomfortability. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why people are just drowning in the readily available dopamine thing on the shelf, like whatever 100%. You want to pick. And it's just something that we really need to be aware of going forward. That, like, as I have kids that are growing up, that, like, I want them to know, like, hey, just so you know, like, life's uncomfortable. You got to be able to deal with it. Don't just go watch Netflix. Yeah. Don't just go play on your iPad. Don't just go surf the web. That part of it is like, it's so much to do with this instant gratification society that 100%. We are, that we have to know that there's a long game too. And there's a game where, like, when we practice these spiritual things that we can do, it helps create freedom in the sense that we're not just running from thing to thing to thing, that we can learn to be, that we can have some of that resiliency, because we know that, like, this is part of life. And I think a big part of it is I didn't know. No one told me, like, hey man, like, you got to learn to deal with this kind of stuff, to search in yourself, to understand who you are, to understand how to deal with pain. That's why I loved what we've talked about so far in both of our episodes, because, like, if you know, and if you're searching for who you are and you have learned to be comfortable with that pursuit and trying to figure that out and trying to search on the inside, and you know how to deal with pain, you flex that muscle, you figured out, like, it's something where it frees you. Mm-hmm. Because what addiction is the sense that, like, whatever way you've been programmed, where you don't want to deal with some sort of painful, traumatic thing in your head, or some sort of suffering, or some mental construct that's keeping you bound, that's what's there. That's why someone can take a pill and, like, instantly be addicted, because everything in their life is said, like, once you take this, this is your form of heaven. Mm-hmm. This is your form of heaven. And how do you turn away from something that brings you to heaven as soon as you take it? You're not going to. You're going to run back to it constantly.
Oh, yeah. Because it works.
Yeah, because it gives you that moment of joy, that moment of freedom, that moment of, like, oh, man, this is great. I feel like I can actually breathe right now. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's learning to do that and learning to figure out life where you don't need that, where you can get to that place in here. But it's hard. Yeah. Because like we keep talking about my pod experience this morning, because stuff like that happens and you're like, I don't even want to go back in one of those things, because going in a story like that makes me not want to do it. And that's why I did what I did. Yeah. Right? And so the point is like, looking at what addiction is, it's basically picking whatever you want that brings those moments of joy, that moments of normality, and having something be something that you chose to go to, that you're like, oh man, this is great. I'm going to keep running to this thing, right? There may be several different things or whatever, and you're constantly going to one or the other, because that's where you find your bliss. That's where you find your peace. Mm-hmm. And then next thing you know, when you're putting your bliss and your peace into things, it's horrible, because they turn on you.
They own you.
And they own you.
There's a price to pay. Yeah. And there's always going to be a fucking debt collector. And the scary thing is, you know, it's in the way drug dealers, a lot of times, you know, the first time's free, you know, and they're like, well, that sounds like a fucking fantastic deal. And I'll just do it once and I'll never do it again. But the reality is they're knowingly giving you the first one for free, because after that first hit,
lifetime customer.
There's no rewind. There is no rewind.
It's horrible.
So, and as soon as you start to run away from it, like, there is a fucking bounty hunter in your soul that will fucking find you. As strong as you think you are, there's a life circumstance that will remind you that, hey, motherfucker, like, you took this drug and it works for you. And if you think you're strong enough to just withstand this life circumstance, you're wrong. Because I'm available. And you just have to go down the block and around the corner and talk to that one guy and get that hit. So that's why I argue that to be an addict is to be human. Because addictions have a spectrum of destructive realities within them. Like if you read the fine print behind the box of the cocaine, like, yeah, it says like may cause fucking death. But you look on the back of the box, if you go purchase a gym membership, it doesn't tell you like, hey, at some point you're going to realize that being sexy and being lean is going to feel fantastic because people are going to compliment you, and that false sense of like, hey, your body is what defines you and you're gorgeous. And if you maintain that, you can maintain value. So what do? You carry the weight of needing to be more physically perfect, aesthetically. So what used to be, I want to pursue being healthy, becomes, if my body isn't the thing that people are noticing anymore, then I will lack value. So it's just as all-consuming that man or woman that obsesses over their nutrition and the gym, they think about that shit every fucking day. Every moment. They build their nutrition systems every day, and there's fucking supplements. Like, their whole life is built around the gym, eventually, over that addictive behavior to feeling like, I'm powerful. Like, look at me, aesthetically, I'm beautiful, right? And our culture says to be aesthetically beautiful is the only thing that fucking matters, pretty much. And whatever's in here absolutely doesn't matter, because who cares? Fucking bury it, hide it. It's uncomfortable, you know? Yeah. So there is no gym for the soul.
Yeah.
None. And I think that's essentially what you and I are trying to do is open a gym and have free membership for whoever wants to get involved with the conversation, start flexing the emotional soul muscles that are essential to fucking not only existing through life, not only surviving, but how do we thrive? How do we thrive? And it's to be a humble acceptor of chaos, enter into it, flex the muscle, accept the defeats when they come, but don't run away from it. Realize that to be defeated at different points in your life is essentially a fucking great opportunity to grow. It is an incredible opportunity to see why am I feeling weak? Why am I terrified? Why am I running to run away? And then you are able to honestly have a conversation with, well, what do I need to be prepared for this thing next time? And how do I flex the muscle in the meantime before the next chaotic fucking event happens in my life? How do I start building endurance preemptively? You know, because that's the thing that happens. Chaos happens. No one's prepared for it. It crushes them. They develop an addictive behavior to cope with it, and there's no rewind. But my argument is, if we are addicts, if we are human by default, we have pattern behavior, can we build sustainable preemptive addictions that are healthy, quote unquote, that will prepare us for the chaos so that we can not run away from it, but withstand the path through the chaos? So it's understanding our addictive natures and saying, well, if this thing's so fucking powerful, how come I can't use it for good? Can I become addicted to knowledge in a healthy way? Can I be addicted to strength and sustaining emotional endurance through things? Can I be addicted to understanding that who I am, my value, isn't fucking conditioned on what people think or believe? My value and my understanding of it is my perception of it. I don't have to let anyone dictate my value. My mother, my father, my peers, my wife, my children, anyone of influence, I don't need to give them that power to say, you are this or that or this. I can fucking develop the tools and the stamina and be addicted to self-respect and dignity, and I can allow myself to fail and be vulnerable and to be recognizing that I'm horribly capable of failing, and that's okay. And to develop the muscle of patience with yourself, to realize that you don't need to be a fucking ridiculous D1 coach to yourself and say, get the fuck back in the game. You need to be this. Like, there are days where I don't there's days I try not to even think about developing my soul because I'm too tired. And I let myself have that day of just saying, fuck that shit. You can do it tomorrow. Sure. But that's how much I've developed the muscle of patience within myself, realizing like that's the shit I need, because that's why people run away from pain, run away from chaos, because they're painfully being shown you don't have the strength necessary to face this challenge. Therefore, run the fuck away like a scared little girl or boy. But I have developed the muscle, and it's essential to develop the muscle to be human and have a fulfilled life, is to say, You don't need to be anything. Like, you can
go up to the chaos and do your best. And if your best isn't good enough, then take a sabbatical from that scenario and try to understand why it is such a chaotic moment for you. But I wrote something, Ryan, and I'm not excited about reading it. But I feel guilty. I mean, you've already been vulnerable and like give us some context of what your understanding of addiction is, and here I am fucking tiptoeing around all the issues and talking so passionately but very not personally about it. So last night I wrote something, and I intentionally, as I told you earlier, I procrastinated writing it because I wanted it to be as raw and honest as it could be. And I'm so painfully fucking an addict, and it's so irreversible for me. I have just found addictions that are culturally acceptable, and I tried to hide behind them. And so I'm just going to read it, and it's going to be painfully obvious what I struggle with.
Okay.
January 12th, 2019, 10:03 p.m. Jordan, if you are reading this, fucking stop. It is not too late to shut the fuck up and just bullshit your way through this conversation, which I feel like I have for the most part. Jordan, you know better than most that the world doesn't give a fuck about you or your sad story regarding addiction. You know you would rather strip naked in front of the camera and have the world observe and measure your sword of hope and justice 1,000,007 times out of 10, instead of sitting here now and strip your soul naked and show the shit that you yourself are too fucking cowardly to observe yourself. Give yourself the greatest gift and let your subconscious do its fucking job and continue to bury your past, allow you to arrogantly pretend that you've done enough psychoanalytical work and evolved beyond the addictions of your past. Sincerely, your subconscious. So I started writing last night, and I had writer's block for a painfully large amount of time I don't want to admit. And that's all that could come out. And then I cleared the clogged arteries in my soul, and then I started writing, and I just titled it Addiction. Shakespeare was the first recorded writer to use the word addiction in writing. This is painfully ironic because my intention was to write a poem about addiction and my relationship with it. I'm too tired to attempt to be poetic about this painful topic. My instinctual desire is to write a poem and verbally hide behind word and letter combinations in hopes that you won't be able to see the disgusting truth within me. My thesis on addiction is this: I am human, therefore I am an addict. You are human, therefore you are an addict. Addiction has never and will never be escapable for the human species. No, addiction is not for the unfortunate few who have succumbed to their insatiable appetites for the escape opioids provide. Fuck no. If you are a breathing human, you are an addict. You will see this addict in the mirror every day. You and I are addicted to seeking comfort. And somewhere along the line, we all got dealt a shitty hand of cards and have no fucking idea how to handle the burden. So we carry that shit and we find ways to cope with it. Some of us got told, you're ugly, stupid, worthless, slow, a waste of life. Some of us got told we are beautiful and smart and have to suffocate ourselves with carrying the torch of maintaining that perceived perfection. We are all walking around every day addicted to our patterns, surviving this life. Some addictions look pretty, pursuing aesthetic beauty and power, but they are just as mentally and spiritually bankrupt as the crack addict who sold their child into prostitution just to get another high. We are all addicts, period. I've been addicted to many things. My current addiction is keeping people at a distance and not allowing them into my heart's atmosphere. I don't think there is a lot of pulse left in my heart, and I have sabotaged and intentionally isolated my soul from others. I'm addicted to the false sense of security I get high off of when I know I have created a life that cannot be hurt by love. I have cut myself off from my blood family. My friend list is shrinking dramatically because the control and power I am addicted to is not allowing my heart to get broken or whatever left of it is. I'm terrified of love. If no one is in my life to love me, then I will never get hurt again. So here I am, the unbreakable, loveless man, attempting to pave the way for my fellow addicts to a path leading to purpose and life's meaning. I'm sitting here naked, exposing my greatest insecurities because I have no more fucks to give to pointless opinions unwelcomed by others. I only seek truth. I'm addicted to truth. But I know I will never find it until I am naked, looking at my soul in the mirror and being honest with what I see. So, what's interesting about that last portion is it exposes what I believe addiction is, and it's fucking waking up and living every fucking day, and then you go to bed. And my secret hidden addiction currently is realizing that human beings are starving for love, and we have no fucking idea how to give or receive it. And I look at, and I alluded to this in previous talks, but I look at human nature, and we're living in an emotional stock market. And all we do when we connect or attempt to connect with others is we're bartering emotional currency. And we spend time with people only to get something from them, or only to sell something to be perceived as something specific. So that last portion was basically saying, like, I'm fucking bankrupt. I tried investing in so many different stock options and friendships and relationships. And in order for me to get through the day, I'm at a point where I had to, like, really cut off my blood family. And because of the emotional chaos it stirs up in me, I realized that I'm only responsible to myself in facilitating a path for myself to fucking just get through the day healthily. And in order to do that, it's a very sad reality, to be honest, about, like, I can't be connected to my family, and there's a lot of people I can't be connected to in order for me to stay fucking sane every day. So I've built this false sense of security of lovelessness, and it's fucking sad and lonely. And it's an addiction, man. Because I've tried too many ways to establish rapport with people to get that thing that I'm after, that love. And my painful inability to be synthetic anymore is 100% almost not able to be connected to any other life. And I'd rather be alone than have pretend connections with people. And it's exhausting. It's fucking exhausting to see people wanting to connect to me, but knowing it's for something they want to take. And I'm only sitting here because you're the first human being that has ever genuinely wanted to just connect to me and explore truth. And we both have selfish motives for being here, obviously, because we're human.
Yeah.
But we're both being selfish with the same goal of wanting to find truth. And I think that is the one thing that is a healthy addiction to. And I'm at this point, I'm ride or die to seek truth. And is it healthy? Probably not, the way I facilitate it. But yeah, I'm just going to stop talking, but and let you say something to what I just poured out. So,
man, there's a lot to unpack. Oh man, that was great. Thanks for writing and reading that.
Yeah, dude.
I think first I want to go back to something you said before you wrote, and the first thing was talking about basically trading addictions, because it kind of ties into what you were reading about too, because a big part of treating addictions is you get into these groups and you do therapy and stuff like that, right? Where my biggest problem with a lot of these groups, because dude, I've been in a lot of groups.
Same yeah.
Is you go and like you talk about the most intimate stuff in the world and the deepest stuff in these people's lives, but you are in a relationship with these people. You're there like a leech trying to suck whatever you can out of this person, right? Where it's like, save me, I'm in here because I need to be saved, and like you're part of that method, right? And the hardest part is I really do want to have relationships with a lot of these people. And then you realize, like, after these groups, like, dude, I used to call people all the time, part of the groups, calling, talking, right? You talk about some of this stuff and you're like, oh man, like, that was a really good conversation, you know? I really helped so-and-so or whatever. And then you realize just like, no, man, it's just a facade. Like that person's using you to get free.
Yeah.
And and I think I just realized this after a while. Like, you know, when I was in counseling, my counselor was like, you know, you should go to these groups. It'd be helpful, right? It's because if you see what it is, it's basically intimacy 101, right? You sit in a group, everyone says their name, length of sobriety, blah, blah, blah. And you go around, there's no judgment whatsoever. You get done talking, thanks, Ryan. That's every time. Doesn't matter what I say, you know, unless I violate some strict rule that's there, right?
There's no heartbeat.
Yeah. But it's almost like the thing that like really turned me off from this whole thing was like, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll take my counselor's approach. I'll accept it as a method for me to find a way out of this because it works. It helps people get out of it. But the people that are free of it are almost like a freaking robot, right? It's like I've been sober for 5 years, three days, you know, 2 hours and 6 minutes, right? And it's just to me, it was like, I'm like, I always was in this group like, you know, is this really what freedom looks like? Is this what it looks like? I'm counting down or counting up from my last bad act, and I'm owning into my identity as hi, I'm Ryan, I'm an addict, and blah blah blah, right? You know, it's something that I really struggle with because there's a part of me that owns it in the sense that yes, I did that. I was a slave to whatever it was. Right? Where I own that, but do I have to continually own it? Like, is it part of me for the rest of my life now? But that's part of what you're talking about, right? We're all addicts, but I think there's a really, it's hard to differentiate what's going on there. We're all addicts in the sense that
we're comfort seekers.
Yeah.
And we can develop those patterns to a destructive level.
Yeah. But like, that's part of it, right? Where it's not saying I am an addict to this and like this is me, like, you know, like I get like if you've had alcohol and you take a sip of it, like it could take you right back down that road, right? Like I get that part of it, but there's something where it creeps into your identity. That's the part where I wonder, where it's like, man, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, and I don't necessarily agree with the fact that like it takes this robotic method in order to find freedom, because to me it seems like there's a better way of doing this, right? Yeah. There's a way of finding true intimacy, and there's a way of connecting with yourself and what's real in a way where you can break free from all these vices.
Yeah. Well, you bring up such an important point. It's something I've been totally not addressing these last couple of weeks, just thinking about this talk we're going to have. And one of the most essential parts to recognizing addiction and addictive behavior and separating yourself from it isn't your identity. And one of the most destructive things, and you just fucking said it thoroughly, is our remedy, quote unquote, for creating a new course from addictive behavior is to not solve the core issue. It's to put a Band-Aid on it, where you have this like sleepover with whatever group, and you pop popcorn and you hang out with these people and you're like, yay, we all had really sad things in our life that almost fucking killed us. Like, let's just reminisce about those things. Those aren't our issues anymore. But the problem is you're constantly, repeatedly re-solidifying that your identity is this thing by surrounding yourself with other people who believe their identity is an addict of whatever addiction they had. In Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, there's an extended studies available that he developed logotherapy, and a big part of the success he saw with human beings in separating from addictions is you need to get the fuck away from anything associated with your addiction. And that's one of the biggest and most saddest things is you see people who were addicts having addictive behavior, still just as connected to the addictive behavior, but in a more aesthetically pleasing way, like becoming an AA leader or someone who's going to do crisis management for whatever issue, addicted behavior you had before. It's like you're not separating yourself from the addiction because you're still addicted to the chaos of the environment that you were in. And he realized that a lot of people don't separate themselves from addictive behaviors because they only evolve and put a Band-Aid on it. It's a very interesting thing to like you said, having your addictive behavior, being with a group of guys that deal with it, there's a hollowness to those guys because they're not dealing with the core issue. They're just trying to survive the week, meeting the next weekend, and just ping-ponging back and forth like, yeah, we're fucked up. Oh, you are too? Sweet. Me too. Rad. But there's no like, no, let's go create life.
Yeah.
Separated from this thing.
Yeah. What I do think, the groups are a great method of like, if you have nowhere, if you're lost.
Yep. It's a beginning conversation.
It helps, like, I mean, like I said, it's intimacy
Absolutely.
101, where like it could connect you, where like there's dudes that like can sit there and listen to you and help you, you know? Where it does get to a place where, like, for me, it was extremely helpful kind of connecting some of the dots that needed to be connected. But
Absolutely.
it's like it's like a circle that just keeps going back. And I'm like, well, it seems like I need to jump off this carousel.
It's the training wheels necessary to learn how to get off your fucking face when you've fallen in life. You facing the addiction, you get in a group, it's the training wheels. But at some point, you have to find out how to be separate from the addiction, independent of this support group. Like, not to say that if you're in a support group the rest of your life, you're failing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying the goal should be, how do you independently, without any crutch, any false form of security that groups can be or other people, like, how do we get to the point of establishing enough courage over a sustained period of time to be resilient enough under any circumstance to not run back to that addictive behavior? It's like, how do you get it in here and not have to have your success be codependent on a group? Like, how do you independently become strong?
Yeah. No, I totally, and I think that's the hardest part for me with, like, those groups can be such a great crutch when you need it. Like,
Absolutely.
You know, if your legs are broken, you need crutches to figure out how to walk again.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to imply. Exactly.
You know, and it was. And I'm totally grateful and thankful for everyone I met along the way, for even if it wasn't what I wanted it to be or whatever, it was great for what it was.
Absolutely.
And it's not that I would never go back or try to help people or whatever. I don't want to judge anyone in it. If it's helpful, just do it. It's great.
Absolutely.
Anything right now, cling to something that could get you away from this destructive place. But I don't want it to just end there where it's like, okay, life's manageable now. That's it. You know, I mean, you're not thriving in that sense. It is like what you said with training wheels. That's a great way to think about it. It's like riding a bike with training wheels. I mean, it can be, you know, but it's just, there's so much more. Like, you want to be so much like freer and in tune with yourself in a way where you find that inner joy, that inner peace, that like you realize that like you're not just going to reach for this thing or reach for another thing, or like my group is my thing now or something like that. That you can connect to God in a sense of, like, that's like the only thing we're really addicted to is that truth, is that God, is that deep reality of, like, it stems from who we are. Yeah. It's this deep way of understanding of, like, okay, like what does that even mean? Am I a soul? Am I like you know, like what we're talking about? But like, knowing that deep down where you're not scared of it anymore, that you can connect to that you're pursuing that, because it's in the pursuit, in the seeking, that you find the peace by just like stopping and just like being okay with like not knowing sometimes. And it sounds really broad, but what I'm just saying is, like, we want something more concrete, right? We want that magic pill. We want that instant comfort or something like that. But it's not how it works. Like, part of life and figuring out addiction and how to thrive is part of figuring out how do you master yourself? How do you live yourself? How do you say, like, I've figured out how to be Ryan to the full extent of being Ryan? Yeah. That's what you want. That's where freedom comes. That's where the love comes and everything else. And this is something where we could talk about next time, but I think for this topic, it's a matter of like learning what love means, in a sense of like
100%.
maybe love isn't so much a sense of something I give and receive, but maybe it's like a state of being.
100%.
You know, and it takes a concept of understanding of what love really is. And I think it's so tied to addiction because, like you're saying, like we're all just starving, you know, and it's a matter of like not settling and saying, I'm going to find it, and being bold enough to do that. And I think a big part of addiction, a huge part of addiction is understanding how much like we need to be gentle to ourselves.
100%.
Because it's so hard, man. Like when you're going through this process and you're trying to figure it out, like you are just beating yourself and shaming yourself, and it could be so harmful because that's what makes you run to that thing constantly.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is like if you learn to love yourself and to seek love in that way, it's like a breath of fresh air, you know, where you're suffocating, where you could actually go, oh man, I can breathe again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, you're bringing up the transition you're establishing is so important, because I would argue, and that's partly why I think the last part I wrote came out, is because I have spent, you know, the bulk of the 32 years in a state of addiction, and with the years of the eating disorder that I had and that fucking chaos. I don't want to spend too much time, not because I'm afraid to talk about it, but it's that addiction stemmed from, and pornography addiction and everything. Every addiction that we have is facilitating an escape from something. Okay, so to simplify what addiction is and what it's facilitating, it's a false sense of security from the thing we're running away from. I would argue that the thing we're all running away from is our inability to understand where our value stems from, and the mismanagement that either our parents or friends or influences along the way have bestowed what our perception of what our value is. And the reason why we are addicted to whatever substances, whatever trophies or achievements in our workplace, it all stems from a misunderstanding and a lack of even fucking context of where does my value and where does love, how do I, and I alluded to earlier that stock market we basically live in every day, the circus of juggling for attention every day is, do I know what my value is? And if I don't, and if it's ever in question, I'm going to run away to something comfortable. Like you said, if you're anxious when you're a child and there is a question of, I am not a strong young man and I don't know how to feel peace in my life, well, I'm going to run away. So the springboard that every addiction is ignited from is a lack of understanding of how worth you are of being loved. And that's why at the end of this, like, I'm 32 fucking years old, and I'm basically in writing admitting to myself, like, I've basically created my life now to be an impenetrable fortress of lovelessness, because I've had too much experience-based truth, quote unquote, that love is not available to my soul, and it's fucking hard to have the courage to be honest about that, and to realize that I created that shit. I created this fortress. I created a life that doesn't allow anyone in, and I'm exhaustingly too in tune with people's truth to know that I am not wanted. I'm not wanted for anything but what I can give them. And I think that's part of being human, though, and part of being a family is recognizing that we will never separate ourselves from the selfish nature of needing to feel value, needing to feel love, and we're programmed to seek it from an acquiring. Like, this is something I have to go acquire. In the same way, I want to build up my bank account for that financial security for when shit hits the fan. But how do you build up your soul's, bank account to where when shit does hit the fan, you have invested in yourself enough with self-love to be able to distribute the patience necessary to get through this season of life, or the endurance or the courage, whatever it is, to get through whatever chaos is happening. But I think it's important to recognize that addictions stem from something bad is happening with understanding your value system and your worthiness of being loved. And our whole entire fucking world is built on it, from our the way every structure of every business is, commodities are sold and distributed, is preying upon our lack of understanding that we are 100% worth being loved who we are now, and we don't need to earn that shit. We've never been more worthy of receiving love in this moment than we are going to be in the future or in the past. And it's a brutally hippie fucking
well, it's a tough one for people to own that are doing lines of coke and shooting up heroin, and who see themselves as despicable. As someone who's gone to different sex recovery groups, you want to talk about people seeing themselves as despicable. See people in that room. I don't know if there's a more shameful addiction than some of the stuff you find in that room. And trying to see how people like that can love themselves, that's a tough one. But when you see that when they do, and the power that it brings, the redemptive power is amazing. But it shows the harm of some of these things, man. When you are caught in something that makes you feel like you are just gross and unworthy, and you'll never be enough to ever be happy or make anybody else happy or whatever. It is one of the worst places that I've ever seen.
Totally.
And it's such a hard thing to talk about this, where someone like that can find it, because it seems like it's never going to be found. It's just that lost search, where you're searching, you feel like you're searching, but like you're lost. It's not even in the distance. Well,
that imagery, I think that you that's a brilliant point, because having something lost that needs to be found is the gate key to understanding why you're in a debilitating addictive behavior. So what is the thing that you lost that you're trying to synthetically recreate through this addictive behavior? Like, that's the core issue. And I think you and I are both on the same page. Is the thing we lost is, at some point in our evolution, in our developmental phase as a child, or in our mind, at some point, the thing that we lost or got robbed, that we willingly gave over, is a parent or someone of influence along the way said, you aren't worth being loved. And your love is 100% conditioned on how you perform and what you do and what you create. We lost, all of us lost, and are survivors of the state of mind that our love is not intrinsically worth being in a state of being, like you're saying. Like, how do I be human in this moment and have peace? Because we are not human beings, we are human doings. We are 100% driven on, what do I do to attain the thing that I lost? Because if I lost it, I got to do something to get it back. And that's the thing, is we're carrying every day, is we're addicted to the lie that you have to do something to achieve self-love. And you fill in the blank. Whatever the fuck it is you're addicted to, it's because you think you lost something that you need to earn back. So at some point as a child, we had the impression upon us that created the anxiety for you, or created the fucking infinite and still current lovelessness in my life. It's, how do I, and that's what I've realized in reading and writing that last section last night. I'm like, fuck me. Like, how beautiful is it that I have the capacity and the courage to sit here and write this? And I feel peace, Ryan. I felt peace writing it, because I am at a point where I do love myself enough to say, fucking bummer that that's the truth. But what's so rad is that bummer is very quickly followed up by, that's okay. And it makes me want to cry, but it's like, I'm trying to find a way to nurture that broken boy in my mind, that still to this day, that subconscious that I wrote, that at the beginning said, don't fucking talk about this shit. Like, that's the broken boy that says, why the fuck are you trying to find meaning in life? It's not there. It's not. And fortunately, my present self has started developing the emotional muscles in the emotional gym to start flexing the atrophied muscles of self-love that have pretty much never been there. And I sit there with what I wrote last night, and I know I'm going to come here and sit with you, and I'm like, it's incredibly fucking okay that this is where I'm at. because this is what my life has led to. And I've been addicted to a lot of things that have made me feel that I can escape the inevitable reality that until I deal with the fact that my love is accessible and at every moment inside of myself intrinsically, I don't need to fucking earn that shit. It's not a commodity I need to steal from you or steal from someone else or juggle for someone at the gym or juggle for someone at work. I don't need a fucking trophy. I need to find a way to be at a state of peace in every form of chaos in my life and fucking breathe and say, everything is happening the way it's supposed to, otherwise it wouldn't be happening the way that it is. My challenge is, how do I get through it and be present with it and not run the fuck away? And that's self-love, is to be in a state of breathing, to be in that saltwater like suffocation bath that you're in this morning, and to have the muscles develop to say, it's okay to be fucking terrified and claustrophobic. It's okay. What's not okay is to try to run away, what we need to do is to say, how do I get addicted to learning to be okay with where I'm at and learning to love myself, and addicted to not seeking that in some synthetic form in another source? Because love can be offered. It can. Humans don't know how to do it without a price tag. So we got to fucking how to create it within ourselves. So how do you create at this point in your life? How have you created? What are the things that you do today that are tangible fucking things for whoever's going to listen, or selfishly for me, I'm like, fucking help me, Ryan. Like, what are the things you do every day that create? I think what you did, that saltwater bath this morning, like, you did something that takes fucking balls. Go sit with yourself quietly and meditate. Like, you're trying to develop as a man. So that's an easy, like, stepping stone to, like, say, but, like, what are the things you're doing right now to not run away from your lack of self-love, but enter into it and say, why don't I love myself, and why do I still have these patterns of behavior that I want to run to create false forms of security?
Dude, I think it ties back to really knowing who you are and like seeking that, man, because like we get so caught up in whatever identity that we've been told, that we've accepted, and that may be holding us hostage, right? So I think a big part of learning to love yourself is to learn to see yourself in a much more, you know, I wrote about it in my book. I called it God sight is the word I use, because I imagined someone having me on Truman TV, watching my life,
literally,
and seeing me from an infant and seeing everything that's happened in my life, to every thought I've had, to every experience I've had. What would that being see? How would that person feel?
So you're your own Truman Show. You're watching yourself.
But in a sense of like trying to say, like, I feel like if you could do that for someone, if I could do that for your life, I bet I would be so filled for compassion for you that it would overwhelm me to see like something happen in your life, because it's like what you have as a father. When you see your kid, you get a taste of that, because you're like, I made this little dude, right? He's part of me. I love this man. I love this little guy so much. It's hard for me to deal with. Yeah. And I don't even know anything close to what I'm talking about. Yeah. So imagine in that situation that you could see yourself that way. Right? If you could see yourself that way, you would show yourself empathy, man. You would show yourself grace. You would be your biggest cheerleader on the sidelines, right? Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it, because we don't do that. We don't do that with ourselves or with each other. We don't try to seek that, because all we see is what's in front of us, because we are that instant. Like, what's here in front of me right now is what's real.
Like that matters.
Yeah, that asshole on the road that just cut me off, like, that guy's a dick, man. I'm going to say that guy's a dick. Screw that guy. Like, he had no reason for doing that. And in reality is, you have no idea. And if, like, you could just tune back and try to understand what made somebody like that, it would be much different. Yeah. But and that's a big part of it, man. So a big part of like this whole process is learning to see yourself in that way. Learning to detach from these things that you've said, this is me, when they're not you. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm a claustrophobic person or something, right? No, that's not me. That's something I've struggled with. Yeah. And it's not putting that in the pot that is Ryan Pottle, right? It's being able to let that stuff go and look at it again and say, you know what?
there's no reason not to love yourself. And if there is reasons that pop up, it's showing you that you aren't seeing the big picture here. And I think that's just a big part of it, because I think when you pencil out the math, the equation is always love if the math is right. Yeah. We have a great way of making it equal a different sum, but that's because we're really bad at algebra. Right? And I think that's a big part of why we get into these addictions and stuff like that. Because we look at the math and we're like, piece of shit. Yeah. Right? Math equals piece of shit.
Math doesn't lie.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it's like, no, go back to it and figure out the equation always comes back to love. If it's a pure equation, but it's not pure because we taint it. And I think when it comes down to it, when talking about this, that's the hardest part is going back to trying to figure that out and ask yourself, like, you know, that in part of my journey with all these groups and trying to figure out addictions and my journey with all this stuff is trying to understand myself and, you know, the way I am, and trying to learn to accept it, because the reason I was addicted is because I rejected it. I rejected it wholeheartedly. This isn't me. I'm not this person, blah, 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 you know, and it's all stems from that inner rejection. I think we talked about this before. Yeah. Rejection is basically the opposite of love, because in love is pure acceptance of like what's going on right now. Yeah. And so if that's your spirit, you're going to be stuck. I think a big part of it is working through it and be like, why can't I accept this right now? And if you can ask yourself that question, pursue it, you will find freedom. Yeah. And if you can't, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be like, screw this, I'm not this person, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you are this person. Accept it. There's some bad shit that's happening in people's lives. Yeah. There's some bad shit that's happening in your life. And it's like, no, you accept it. You work through it. You own it. You move on. And you take it and you go with it, because you can't choose what you've been dealt. You can't. Yeah. And it sounds so cliche, but it is true. It's true, because like, unless you own the hand you've been given, you will never be free. No. You will be stuck in this place of bitterness and rejection and whatever addiction you want to run to. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it.
Bottom line, man. And that's ultimately, I think, the goal of every conversation we have, and every internal conversation you have, independent of these heavy psychological fucking word jousting things. When you're with yourself, you have to find the simplest route to your soul in order to quiet all the noise. And that's why, like you were talking about the math, the equation, like I jokingly say that all the time. And I have to look at things simply. And the equation of addiction is lack of understanding of self-love equates to an infinite gateway drug of all addictions in life. And I had a conversation with someone very recently who had the courage to speak into my life, and it was regarding the last portion I wrote about the fortress I've built around not accepting love. And ironically, my whole mission in life is, because of the love has been so void, is to seek acquiring love. And what does that even fucking mean? And there's an equal opposite reaction to everything in life. And I know that I'm sitting here because of my lack of self-love. I'm wanting to understand how to love myself. That's why I'm here. And in as courageous a way as I fucking know how to do. But this person basically called me out on every fucking cell of my shit. And it was so buried in my subconscious. My lack of self-love was so buried underneath my adult psychoanalytical muscles I've built on self-reflection. There's still that broken boy has locked away in a corridor, unbeknownst to me. It's just shit that I haven't dealt with. They basically said, here's the deal, like if you want to pursue your truth, if you want to manifest and understand what love is, you need to own the fact that you're sabotaging any form of love coming into your life. So how the fuck are you expecting to create context for your daughter to grow up and see a man and a father that was fearlessly pursuing the only thing that fucking mattered? This person basically said, you have no business exploring these unknown territories of meaning in life until you have the courage to be honest that you're not even willing to accept that love that you're trying to create. And that fucking sucked. That sucked. But it was also the most beautiful thing because of my capacity to see truth and the fearlessness that I have. I just simply said, you're right. I wasn't even defensive. I was just like, yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow, but that's how much this person loved me in that moment by telling me the thing that I needed to hear. And no one wants to tell someone that, and no one wants to hear that shit. And but I owe an infinite life debt to that conversation because it allowed me to have that level of self-love to write down and to write that I don't fucking want love in my life, if I'm honest. I don't, because that shit hurts too much.
Yeah.
But I know I need it. So I'm wanting to put myself in a position of exploring it and baby stepping, tiptoeing, and wading into the pool of chaos that love will inevitably have. But that's my equation, and that's where I'm at. Is recognizing that I've explored so many forms of addiction. All of them have failed. So here I am, owning the fact that until I even have the capacity to learn how to love myself and accept that love into my life, how am I going to understand something until I let it in? And it's terrifying, man. And that's why I have infinite compassion for everyone with an addiction. It's not because I've experienced addiction on such debilitating levels, but it's because I know what it's like to not have the courage to create self-love or even accept it. And it's terrifying, and that's the only way addictive behaviors will stop being as destructive, is when you accept how destructive they are and exploring why. It's because we're fucking sad and lonely as fuck. And most of the people in our lives are very intentionally, subconsciously picked to play a role in our life, to give us a false sense of security of, these are my friends that I have fun with and get drunk with. These are my friends that I go do this activity with, but none of them know me. And that's on purpose, because I don't want anyone in. So until we have the courage to sit alone and let ourselves look at ourselves and have the compassion for ourselves, like you're saying in the Truman Show-esque way, you need to take the back seat and just look at what your life has been and what it's led up to and say, that's okay. It's okay.
Well, I think a part of it, dude, with this is learning. This is what I've learned too, is to see yourself in the other person.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like, and I hear you talking, and there's parts of me that are like, dude, that's me. That's me. Where you're talking about struggling with all these, with love and letting people in and stuff like that. I mean, it is. And the more you can do that, the more it helps build that love. Because the hardest, and we are going to talk about love a lot more next time. But I think the biggest, the hardest part about it is when you're loving. I mean, you're putting yourself out there, man. You're just like open, right? And it's just, people suck. They'll just sucker punch you.
Yeah.
And it's hard because, like, in the Western state that we find ourselves, it is full of people that are just sick and broken and don't know how to love. And their form of love is so shallow that it's just superficial, and it's that horse trading love. I love you, you turn around and love me, right? And it's just, there's no depths to it. Because the love we're talking about stems out of being, where it's like you have to express it, otherwise you're hurting yourself, because it's you getting it out there. And it's something really hard. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Because you are going to get hurt, right? Yeah. But I guess it's accepting that in a way where it's just like, it's all part of it, dude. You know what I mean? And like, if I could see myself in the other addict and show that he loved, like, it's almost like you just expect that this person's broken and that's what they're going to do. It sucks where they're at, but the more you can see it, the more you're at peace with, like, yeah, it sucks that this person doesn't know how to do where I'm at now. But what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to be selfish enough, being like, I'm just not going to do it? No, part of it is you do. You do have to. It's like you have to love out of you, and that's what you want, because that's what helps that other addict break free, is when they see somebody that sees them in a way where they're not that ugly, despicable person the way they see themselves. And the addict has to rescue himself. but you could be that person to help them see, like, wow,
Absolutely.
that dude didn't think I was a piece of shit.
Absolutely.
That was amazing. Like, I wonder what I did to make that person not make me feel like, well, maybe it had nothing to do with what I did. He saw how awful I was. That's the power of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But it's a hard thing to do, because all we want to do is hold back. It's a safe place. And it's like, no, that's not going to do any good for anybody, man. Be uncomfortable. Be that person. Be that light to that person. And that's what I've learned through the whole thing. That, like, I feel like after it comes full circle and I look at it, it's just like, it makes you really grateful after going through it. Like, I'm grateful that, like, this whole process did what it did.
Yeah.
And it's made me who I am in a way that I really needed it. And I think it's always it seems like the ironic part at the end of it. Something that just was the bane of your existence. You turn and you're like, man, I'm glad that happened.
Yeah.
It's a weird freaking feeling to have. But it's something where it's just this signal to other people of, like, this is kind of part of the whole process is the fact that, like, where we're at now, most people you're going to be addicted. You're going to be addicted to something. And it's just like, yeah, there's ways out of it. And like what we're talking about, there's, you can ride your bike with training wheels. We're just saying, like, maybe try to do it without training wheels after you get used to training wheels. Mm-hmm. Right? Because
so to sum up, I think the core of addiction and how to springboard to take all this information and actually apply it to your life is, at some point, if you want to understand your addiction within your life and your capacity to run away from discomfort and how addicted you are to whether it's subtle or whether it's very fucking obvious that you're addicted to running away from discomfort, I think you got to look at the equation of what your life's moments and experiences have led up to, and why you choose to or choose not to run away from that chaos. It all comes down to your understanding of love, simply. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. But it sounds very fucking too simple. But I think that's why it's such a chaotic topic, is because we don't want things to be simple, because that requires us to take responsibility for the simplicity of it. Because if it was simple, we'd all be not addicted to things. If it was simple.
Yeah.
But it is simple. And that's why it's so fucking hard. Because it requires us to say, well, if I had this incredibly complex circumstance and these methods of fixing my addictions, then I would acquire it. But because it's so complicated, I'll never be not an addict. But the reason you're an addict is because you seek to run away from your lack of understanding that you're worth being loved right now. And there's a lot of life experiences that say you're not worth being loved, and you believe that shit. But there is a method and there is an equation to finding enough compassion for yourself to sit quietly and try to listen to why it is you believe you're not worth being loved and why you're trying to run away from it. So in this week's, just to kind of wrap things up before I pass it to you, Ryan, this week's imagery was our lactose intolerant Milky Way galaxy astronaut in a very stoic, peaceful state, just sitting at the table of a plethora of addictions, and just, you can't see his expression, obviously, because he's almost fucking zenned out and just looking at himself in the mirror and just saying, this is what it means to be human. I've explored all these things that have given me synthetic forms of security in my addictive state of running away from self-love. And in the same way, you and I are sitting at the table saying, what the fuck do we have to do to figure out a better equation in life? That's what I was trying to symbolize here, is like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not gonna find any trajectory in life to go down, any path to go down that's gonna have fulfillment until I learn how to fucking sit quietly and realize I am worth being loved, and how to facilitate that compassion. Until you know how to do that equation, life's never going to equate to meaningful moments. They're gonna be synthetically real. So the astronaut is trying to find some fucking warm blanket hugs out in the galaxy. So next week we're going to be talking about love. And Brian, you want to say something about that?
Yep, next week we'll talk about love, kind of get into what that really means, talk about how it's a state of being, talk about why we need it and why everyone wants to sing about it, but nobody really knows what it is.
No.
So yeah, next week, talk about love. See you then.